Hi friends, welcome back. In our session together today, we are going to discuss the church and why it was founded. And also, we are going to learn about the history of the kingdom of God. Did you know the history of the kingdom of God is very long? Have you ever wondered about the kingdom of God? What it's like? How can we describe it? As you grow older, perhaps you have some new questions about this kingdom. When did it begin? When will it end? If so, when might that be? Well, let's discover more about the history of the kingdom of God together. The history began with creation. From the beginning, there has always been a plan in the mind of God to bring all of creation to a fullness of life. We don't know with exactness when this plan first began to take shape. By best guess of scientists, the universe in which we live first started to develop about 15 billion years ago. Our own Earth is about 4 billion years old. So many years that we can't even count them all. In the very first verse, we find out that God created this wonderful earth, this wonderful universe. We read in the very beginning of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The Bible lets us know that before creation ever began, God already was. God has always been. This represents our first beginning in creation, our first moment in the history of the kingdom of God. Then we read more about the mineral world. In the beginning of creation was a confused mass in which were found all the elements that later formed the earth. But ever so slowly out of this chaos emerged a wonderful order as each element found its place. Millennia passed and God was at work, separating the light from the dark, water from the land. God prepared the mineral world with an incredible variety of rocks and stones and metals, some above the earth's surface and some deep within. Some would be useful, like iron and flint and salt, and some seem to be for pure enjoyment, like opals, silver, rubies. Each one was a part of God's plan. Slowly, God was preparing. Then there were plants. As we look at this time of the creation of the earth, we see that the earth is finally ready for life. So small at first and simple, with algae and one-celled water organisms. But as millennia passed, a great variety of plants emerged, like grass and straw and hay and trees. Some would serve as food, like corn, and some would be used for clothing or to build homes, like wood. Some held miraculous cures. Still others could give joy with their beauty and fragrance. Millennia and millennia were passing, and God was at work preparing. And then it was ready. The animal world came about. And then with these animals emerged a great variety, some very big and some very tiny. From the birds of the sky to the fish in the sea. Animals on land, animals in water. Some would provide clothing and food, and some just exotic and fascinating. Some could serve as companions, like dogs or cats. So carefully and so slowly, God was preparing. And then God created the humans. As millennia passed, there came to be a creature, a little like us, a creature who with time was distinguished from all the other creatures of the earth. For this creature had something that no other creature had, an ability to take the earth into its hands and wonder, who has made all this for me? Humans arrived, guests at a banquet, to find that everything they needed had already been created for them. Everything they dreamed of that could be prepared had been prepared for them already before they arrived. For the first time, there was a creature who could be thankful, who could love the Creator in return, created in His image and likeness. Yes, people. We could say that without humanity, creation would have been beautiful and wonderful, but incomplete. For God built into His great plan a unique role for the work of the human hand, guided by love. Algae would have been fine in and of itself, but reached a greater fulfillment when transformed by the human hand into penicillin, into medicine. Opals, fine, deep beneath the earth's surface, reach their great potential when we enjoyed them with our human eye. God created humans as creatures of the earth and yet set them as guardians of the earth, that through the work of their hands, creation might be brought to its fullest potential. And then came Jesus. We might think that God has given humankind so many gifts over so many millennia, but there was even more that God wanted to give humanity: the gift of God's own self, God's own light and life. We have said that from the beginning, it has always been God's plan to bring all of creation into a fullness of life. Ever so slowly, through prophets and servants of God, God prepared people to receive the gift of Jesus in the world. In the arrival of Jesus, in His preaching and teaching, His dying and rising, we came to know God's very own light and life. We call this this moment in history redemption. Since the time of Jesus, millennia have passed. During these 2 millennia, the light and life of the risen Jesus has been spreading to all the peoples of the earth. And eventually, God will come again, and then He will spread His life and light to all peoples of the earth. It'll become a day when God will be all in all. We call this the parousia. When Jesus comes again, we know that God will reign and that sin will be no more. We don't know when this time might be, but we know that Jesus will come. And then the whole story that God has created as the author will be completed. The story of creation, brought about with the human hand and become one with Him. From creation, redemption, and ultimately to the parousia, God has a very special time in the history of God planned so that you will walk this earth and become His follower, His apostle. In our next module, you will hear the Bible story found in Mark 1, verses 16 through 20.